Hello, folks. This is your host, Tammy Tuckey, and you are now listening to the Tiara Talk Show. We bring you rare interviews with the makers of Disney magic. Whether they be singers, actors, Imagineers, animators, they have all made their mark on the Disney name. Be sure to check out the show notes, other episodes, contests, our social media pages from Facebook to Twitter, and more on our official website at www.thetiaratalkshow.com. All guest opinions are theirs and theirs alone and do not represent the opinions of the Tiara Talk Show or the host. The Tiara Talk Show is not associated with the Disney Company. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode. And from all of us here at the Tiara Talk Show, have a hoop-de-doo day. I'm excited to welcome this week's Tiara Talk Show guest, former Disney Imagineer Brian Collins, to the show. Welcome, Brian.
Well, thank you very much. I am thrilled to be here.
And I'm thrilled to have you on the show this week. Now, let's talk a little bit about your beginnings and where you kind of started.
It's funny because I just put a picture up on Twitter that kind of reiterates a story I've told a few times. I was born in Florida, so I grew up here. And my first trip to the Magic Kingdom was probably back in 1972, shortly after the park opened. And I've got a picture of me standing next to Goofy in, this funny looking hat, and just, mugging for the camera. And, I look at that and I think, what kid doesn't go into the Magic Kingdom, at whatever, 12 years old or something, and look around and think, wouldn't it be cool to be one of the people that actually created all this stuff? And, I think that's probably when I first kind of got the bug or the itch or the desire to kind of do that. And I wouldn't say that, from that point forward, I was just focusing, I want to be an Imagineer, I want to be an Imagineer. At that point, it was more like a little kid looking around going, man, this is so cool. I didn't even know what Imagineers were, at that young age. As time went on, I went through school, I graduated and got my degree. And my first job was actually working in Miami as a video producer. And at the time I was producing the in-flight entertainment programming for Eastern Airlines, who used to have the old If You Had Wings attraction in Magic Kingdom. So I was working for this company, producing their in-flight entertainment for them. And Eastern Airlines went bankrupt, one of the first big airlines to do that. So at a young age, I found myself out of a job and wondering, okay, now what do I do? So my brother lived in Orlando, having always wanted to work for Disney. I thought, well, let me move up there, see if I can get a job with them. And I'm thinking, I'll have like a full year of hotshot video production experience under my belt. They'll have this big office waiting for me, just overlooking the Magic Kingdom. And, I'll stare out and see Cinderella's castle every single day. And moved up here, slept on my brother's couch, went out, got hired by Disney. And lo and behold, I was not overlooking the Magic Kingdom every day. I was checking guests into the front desk of the Contemporary Resort. But it was a foot in the door. And my timing was really good because it was right before the Disney MGM Studios opened up. So shortly after I was hired, I was able to kind of get from behind the Contemporary's front desk and start working as a production assistant at the studios and working for the marketing department. And at that point was doing just like a lot of internal networking in the company, still trying to kind of find my way. At that point was thinking, well, boy, wouldn't it be kind of cool to be an Imagineer? Never really thought, to be honest, I had much of a shot. And I went and I spoke to someone at HR about that. She said, but here's the name of one of the creative directors out at the studios. They still had like a little project trailer out there. So she sent me out to talk to him. And to make a long story short, he gave me a little test project, which I did. And that led to other assignments. And eventually, after about 9 months of temporary assignments and kind of working part-time for them, they offered me a full-time position, and I was able to kind of achieve that. And one of the first things I did was track down Goofy and get another picture standing next to him, which I kept next to my desk with that picture of the 12-year-old kid. And it was kind of cool.
And you worked on Jungle Cruise. I wanted to get into Jungle Cruise right before we get to the studios, because the studios I have such a passion for and a love for. So with Jungle Cruise, you're working on just the queue?
Pretty much just the queue area. At that time, they had redone the queue area for the Jungle Cruise in California, and they wanted to bring that same theming out here. This is going back, several years, and that was really one of the first queues that they really took and they themed out and made really immersive, made this wonderful environment, for guests to appreciate while they were standing in line. So my work was mostly in the queue area. My specialty was I was what they call a show writer. So my job was to come up with scripts and spiels and puns and bad jokes and all that kind of stuff, sign copy, all that kind of stuff that you see in theme parks, that any kind of writing, creative writing that WDI might be involved with.
So now let's talk about the studios. Since you're working on the Great Movie Ride, that is the signature ride of the theme park. So you're working on the queue with this. Now, this is a little bit different than Jungle Cruise because you are looking for props or costumes to feature in the queue.
So my work in the Great Movie Ride was really, mine was kind of cool. It was actually, the Great Movie Ride was already up and running and was in great shape. Again, this was, just a few years after the studios had opened. But at one point, they wanted to freshen up the scenes where the gangster and the bandit take over the cars. And I'm probably giving away spoilers, but if they listen to your show, hopefully they've been to the theme parks already and kind of know what I'm talking about. But there's, the part where either the gangster or the bandit takes over your car and hijacks it, and they wanted to kind of freshen those scenes up. So that was most of the work I did, kind of freshening up a little bit of the copy that the tour guides take you through the attraction with. Primarily me and one other guy who would go in there early mornings before the attraction opened up, and there was one of the cast members, a young girl who worked in there, and she was one of the leads, and we would take her in there and run through the different blockings and try out different lines and scenarios and stuff. So she was really the one who did that. And kind of an interesting story I'll tell you real quick is that one day we were working with her and she said, I got asked to do a guest host spot on a local radio show to come in as I won a contest to be like a DJ for a day. And so she went in, she did that. She came back the next day after doing her gig, and she said, they offered me, the chance to come back and do that again. And to make a long story short, she wound up becoming a full-time DJ at that radio station. And to this day, I think, 20 years later, she's still an on-air personality here in Orlando. I'm like, holy cow. So one of the things that I did as I was freshening up the blocking and all of that is I went back and I wrote some backstories for the gangster character and for the Western character, for the bandit. And it's kind of like a one-page summary of their life story. So it tells how, Musgy grew up on the streets hustling cards as a young kid and, lost his parents and, was running booze for Al Capone and, this whole big, elaborate, colorful story. And the same thing for the gangster character and the bandit character too. It really kind of talks to the amount of detail that Imagineering goes to and that Imagineers go to, which the guests never really, they don't see, but they're certainly affected by it. We do that so that there's consistency in the show, that the cast members who are playing these characters, they can relate to the characters and hopefully, give a much better performance for the guests.
What movie would you have liked to have seen been added to the attraction if there was ever any point in possibility of that happening?
Wow. Oh, my Lord. That is a wonderful question. No one's ever asked me that. And, obviously, I mean, with Disney's foray now into Star Wars and Marvel, I mean, just think of some of the cool stuff you could do with some of those scenes and some of those characters. I mean, one of my favorite old movies, an old black and white, almost like noir movie, is Sunset Boulevard. And you could probably do some really great scenes from that. But that's a cool question. As I've been watching, rides develop and evolve over the years, I'm excited about where it's all going. I mean, there's technology available today that was never available certainly when I was in Imagineering. And, I would love to have some of the toys and tools available these days. To me, it's kind of blows me away, the potential of where all this can be going. I mean, I'm finding rides, in my opinion, I think rides are going to become much more immersive and much more interactive for the guests than they are now, just because technology is going to allow designers to do that. I still stay pretty active in the industry to some extent, at least vicariously, if not practically. And, I've gone to a lot of trade shows recently, and it really kind of gets you thinking. I mean, I was at, a few months ago, they had what's called the IAAPA trade show. And IAAPA is the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions. And that's the largest trade show in the world. It's held in Orlando every year, and it's for the theme entertainment industry. Everything from like mom and pop bowling alleys and putt-putt golf courses all the way up to Disney and Legoland and Universal, the main theme parks. And they showcase the newest technologies in theme park attractions that are coming out. And, there's just some really fun, interesting stuff on the way.
Well, let's end our interview with some Disney-themed questions I like to call the Fab Three. So we'll start with the Donald one, which is, as a child, what Disney film was one of your favorites?
As a kid, what Disney film was one of my favorites? The things that stick in my mind the most are more of like the live action and the animated films. And when I think like what Disney films I liked as a kid, one that comes to mind is like Flubber. So Flubber and, Mary Poppins is definitely one of my all-time favorites for sure. I just love Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke.
And our Goofy question, what Disney character do you think would be your best friend if you met them in person?
Gosh, probably Goofy. Answering a Goofy question with a Goofy answer. Just because he's a very happy-go-lucky kind of a guy, kind of like me.
And our Mickey question, if I ask you to name any Disney song at this very moment, what immediately comes to mind?
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Well, thank you, Brian, for coming on the show. I think we'll head on out with some great movie ride music. Thanks again for coming on the show, Brian.
That sounds awesome. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
When you're terrific, if you're even good, for anyone at all from Shirley Temple to Amy Semple is equally understood. Go out and try your luck, you may be Donald Duck. Hooray for
The Global Broadcasting Service, serving remote outposts since 1928.